Come closer. This is just like our students. They are afraid to sit on the first row. But yesterday you were all dancing and singing, so we can still continue today. Vicino, vicino, okay. We're missing the names of the participants in the round table, but you know all of them at this point. But their names will be coming very soon. The people from the organization got a little bit relaxed after last night and they forgot the names. But obviously, as you see, David Little, Gillian Mansfield, Manuel Célio Conceição, Liliana Szczuka-Dorna, if I'm pronouncing it, Maurizio Gotti, and some others. You, okay? Because it is going to be an interactive round table. So I have some questions for our, how can I say, round table participants. I have some questions, but I'm going to stay with you, stay here because I want to feel closer to you. And I missed the name. At one point we will watch a video. This is something that I mentioned the very first day, if you remember, when we introduced the conference. So it will be a video with Mario Rinvolucri, and he will be telling us about his background experience, his experience in general in Europe, around the world, of creativity, critical thinking, and so this will be part of the round table. The round table, as you will notice, as you will see, has not been prepared. It will be very spontaneous. And why? It's a little bit, when we start courses here at the University of Calabria, for example, students ask the very first day, can you give me the program, can you give me the activities, so what are we going to do, and then the exam, and then da-da-da, everything. And my answer is always, I don't know yet. I need to know you first. And then after this, we know the objectives, of course, but then the details will be created little by little together with you, with the students. And the same here for the round table. So we will create it together. The content of the round table will be part of, and thanks to the professors who decided to participate in it, and then you. You know all of them. David Little, former CercleS president, Gillian Mansfield, formal, but until yesterday. Okay, Manuel Conceição, president of the European Language Council, and Liliana Szczuka-Dorna. Very happy to inform all of you, those of you who did not participate in the assembly yesterday, the new CercleS president, a newly elected CercleS president. And Professor Gotti, Maurizio Gotti, who was former CercleS president for many, many years. I believe 2 mandates, if I remember correctly. Okay. But you know who's going to start? Your name is?
I'm going to start.
Edita, why are you here? Why did I ask you to begin this round table? Is there any particular reason?
Probably the reason is very simple. I'm a scholarship receiver and I'm here in Calabria for the first time. So, buongiorno. And I would At the very beginning, I would like to express my many thanks to the CercleS Association, to all the organizing committee, to Carmen in particular, for inviting me, for giving me the possibility to participate in this great conference, because it's a great opportunity to meet so many interesting people who can motivate me and inspire me for further work. We can exchange ideas, we can look for further cooperation, maybe in the future some interesting research that we can conduct together. And what I can say is, sorry. One more thing that I would like to say is that for simple reasons I couldn't participate in all the presentations, but the ones that were very interesting for me as an English for specific purposes teacher at Poznan University of Technology, where I teach specialized language, were 3 of them. One was delivered by John Marley yesterday. It was a very interesting talk on a certification scheme. This is very interesting because we do similar things at Poznan University of Technology. Another one was delivered by Maria del Carmen Arau Ribeiro and Manuel Moreira da Silva. And they were talking about CLIL, which we also practice in our center. And the third one was the keynote speech delivered by Manuel Célio, which was not only interesting, involving, but also quite funny, which I taught yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Edita. Thank you. Maybe you will get the premialità. Gillian, Liliana, a scholarship, CercleS scholarship. Will we continue? What was the background to this idea of providing a scholarship for young scholars? And will we continue? Gillian.
Yes, this is a new initiative on behalf of CercleS. We wanted to give people opportunities and people the opportunity to take part in a conference when possibly they would not be able to because they have no funding. And so this was a way we thought of helping people to come and join the conference. And it's a new initiative. We didn't have many applicants, unfortunately, but it's a thing for the future. I hope if CercleS, I must say now, if CercleS will continue, because I'm not part of the decision-making board. I think very useful for young people, young researchers, to be able to join in and see what we're doing.
Liliana? Thank you, Gillian.
I would say that yes, we will continue, because those of you who were present yesterday at General Assembly know our budget, so it is good. We have money which can be spent on young researchers, because the idea of our association is to network, but also to help people to conduct research in the areas they're very, very much interested. For me, it was not only pleasure, but privilege, because Edita is from Center of Languages and Communication I represent. And she got her PhD degree this year, so a lot of things I think are happening in her mind now, and meeting prominent figures, important professors in many fields. This is a start, fantastic in research and in individual development. But here I will have an opportunity to talk to you as a new president, to talk to coordinating committee, to presidents of national associations, that if there is a kind of initiative which is sent to you and which is on web page, please talk to your members. I can't believe there was only Edita who can come and join our conference, because there are many, many people. And of course, it was quite a short time, and I know that our organization cannot cover all, can cover all costs, okay? So some of the costs should be either divided into university people represent, or maybe even, individually paid. But I think this is an opportunity our association has created for young researchers. And I'm confident coordinating committee will support, and I, as the new president, can say that yes, we will continue this also for next conference.
Thank you, Liliana. This is very interesting, and we will look forward to meeting so many other young people who are involved in language learning and teaching and language centers commitment. One more feedback before we get to questions for you. From you, from the group. We had in the scientific committee, CercleS decided to have one person belonging to the University of Calabria. Jean, your impression about the conference in general. This is really improvised, so Jean will kill me tomorrow.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank CercleS, and I'd like to thank Carmen for involving me in that role. I have to say that I learned a lot. It was very interesting. I had the chance to be on both the scientific committee and the program committee, so I was also involved in the organization of the program, and that was very interesting, even to have the chance to read all of the abstracts, and that was very interesting for me. And I guess that's all. But thank you, and thank you for participating.
We had just 5 questions. Question number 1, and I'm talking to you now. I'm your interviewer. But do we really communicate among European language centers? Do we have positive examples? Can you mention some positive examples? What do you think we should improve? What do you think we should implement? Feel free to answer.
Okay, can I start?
Maurizio.
I would, of course, say yes, we do communicate, and the best example is Célio sitting here. And yesterday, with Estella from University of Groningen, we said that people from Magic finish as presidents. We participated in Magic Project a few years ago, and today we are Miss and Mr. President, whatever you call, but this is our cooperation. To be more serious, I would say that, of course, there is a huge networking, and it's not only this conference, but many, many other workshops and seminars. We've been in touch, okay, and I can mention here so-called Vulko group. If you wonder who we are, I would say that these are people who every January go to Viadrina University, and Thomas Vogel, director of Language Center, invites us and then transfers us to Vulkov, okay, where people live for 3-4 days talking about language policy, because almost all of us are directors or people responsible for certain administrative tasks. After the conference, we usually go home and we talk to our colleagues and friends. We share ideas on the basis of which we organize our seminars for national organizations. So networking, I think it's the basis of our work. Some of us, probably professors, will talk about research, and I think journal is one of the possibilities of another way of distributing or sharing ideas and projects we've done through our associations or individually. I'm very positive because networking and being in touch with many of you means that even coming from different words, nationalities, with intercultural background different, we still communicate. And this is very, very positive, okay? Because there is a kind of power we get after conferences. Yes, I can do it, okay? There are a lot of new contacts after the conferences. Edita mentioned, okay, she met a lot of new people who yesterday approached and talked about her poster. Some people said, oh no, it shouldn't be a poster, it should be a presentation. It's fantastic data you have, okay? So it starts like that, with a very short talk, but afterwards talks go longer and longer via mail, Skype, maybe extra meetings, invitations to different centers. That's why I'm very positive, because what we teachers and researchers like, we like talks. I wouldn't say never ending, but talks which have a kind of product. And this will be a new program at our language center. It could be maybe tandem program, okay, or invitation for a guest speaker, a professor who will talk to my teachers, my staff. So I think that there is always something positive about meetings, okay? And of course, those of you who like new technologies would say, oh yes, but we have WhatsApp, smartphone, Skype, etc. And I would say fantastic, but nothing can substitute real contacts, okay? During conferences and workshops. So that's the extra value of any meeting to me, and I think this is for this conference as well.
Thank you, Liliana. Gillian.
Yeah, I just wanted to add what we've been trying to do over the past few years. People, maybe a few years ago, started saying, well, what can CercleS do for me? Why should I be a member? And over the years also, with my predecessor, Johann Fischer, we started focus groups, a few focus groups. They are multiplying. A focus group, people are asking to be able to have a face-to-face meeting here at the conference. It's important. Distance, though, is not a problem. Time, maybe, yes, we all know that we find little time for things outside our own institutions. But with the focus groups, you can meet. Skype, video conferencing, there are lots of ways in which you keep in touch. And a lot of these focus groups have been doing things. They have actually also been giving papers on the research they have done together. So I think that's very important. With the focus group, obviously, the reality of it is to give you short-term and long-term, yourself short-term and long-term goals, so that you do, with the short-term, you keep in touch. As Liliana says, you go away enthusiastic. You get back home and you get back to the realities of home. But the way of actually communicating and keeping in touch is now possibly, especially with social networking.
Thank you, Gillian. Gillian mentioned the key word, research. That was a concept mentioned by Manuel yesterday as well. But do we really carry out research in language centers? We have so many interesting ideas, but is there any need to focus slightly more on theoretical background? And I'm looking at Maurizio Gotti now. Should university departments interact more with language centers on this issue? Maurizio?
I mean, this is quite an important issue because, particularly in our context, that is in Italy, usually directors of language centers are chosen among academic people. So we are all involved in research as professors, and this was the added value that we brought to this field, because we just didn't see the service function of language centers, but we always wanted to reflect on what we were doing. So we took advantage, and I think that this is happening every time also in other countries, to promote this. As Manuel was saying yesterday, there are countries in which instead language centers are seen as service units. They are isolated. I know this because as president in the past I knew the reality in the various countries, and I have never agreed with this. I mean, we are not just here as thinking of language centers as mere language schools. So what we have with the added factor of a university language center is that we do not only apply technology and methodology, but we reflect on what we are doing, and we can be somehow innovators. So, and this is the good thing, what I appreciate in the conferences, in the seminars that we do, in the papers that we write and read, that we usually try to reflect. And not that experiences are not important, because I think that we need to find out also the actual result of our thinking, and to start from reality and then reflect on it. But this is the added value that I see in university language centers, that they can combine research and practice, and therefore research can help practice, and practice can give input to more research.
Thank you, Maurizio. Other comments from the audience as well, from you as well? Gillian?
Sorry, me again, and then I'll shut up. I was thinking also of, and there was a very interesting paper in one of the earlier issues of our language journal, Language Learning in Higher Education, talking about teacher-based research and research-based teaching. I think those are the two angles that I think we really need to concentrate on and develop.
Thank you, Gillian. More? And the next question is how CercleS can nicely integrate with the European Language Council actions. Manu.
Okay, good morning. Well, first of all, I will also say something about communication, but about the collaboration between CercleS and, well, both things. Let's start about the question of communication. We have the impression to communicate, but I'm not sure we really communicate. We send information and we receive information, and we have a lot of information, there's no lot. But then you have to do something with this information. For example, the question of language, Europe is in a very difficult situation, on the social, economic, and so on, but on the teaching also, on universities, on the impact on society, and so on. And language have been downsizing in Europe. For example, in the European Union, we used to have, some years ago, a commissioner for multilingualism. And now in Brussels, multilingualism is a sort of office downstairs somewhere where two people are working on employability and on things, very strange things, but not talking about languages. So the topic of languages in Europe is not anymore a political issue, real political issue in Europe. In the Conseil de l'Europe, in Strasbourg, they are doing what they can, but they have been downsizing from a division, unit from a division, well, and now I think there are 2 or 3 people talking about language in Strasbourg and using external experts. Well, there will be a project, but in the political view, this has been totally downsizing. The ECML in Grasse, well, not all the countries are members of the ECML, as you know. So the ECML is part of the Conseil de l'Europe, but the ECML has specific fees, very high fees, and some countries withdraw from the ECML. But they are working a lot. That means in the CERCLE, you are working a lot, and this conference is an example. In the European Language Council, we try to do our best. That means we all are trying to do our best, and we have to put our efforts together. Let's finish this idea of balkanization of associations or whatever. It cannot work. We have to put our efforts together. We have our main our focus, we have our associates, we have our objectives, our aims, all are very fair, very clear, okay, but we have to put it together all the efforts. And I just want to say that we decided yesterday, as Miss President decided yesterday that we create we agreed that now on the president of CERCLE will be invited to all the forums of the fora of the ELC, and the next forum of the ELC will be on 1st and 2nd December in Milano, University Sacro Cuore, and Liliana, I hope she will be there as president of CERCLE, as invited president, and the president of the ELC, we don't know who will be the president in 2018, will be invited to the next conference of CERC. This is starting to collaboration.
Good.
And then share information and share data, and perhaps I would like to discuss it, make links from our websites to one to another, because we really need it to put language in the agenda for our politicians, because they have money and well, they have to do it, and so that we need to collaborate in this sense. Then we need also to share the results of our research oriented or whatever, to share the results, because there are a lot of results of research coming from the association, and they are not known, not enough known. So I don't want to talk too much, but I think this idea of share information and dissemination, and try to be sure that we have someone, a receptor of our message, and we want to have a feedback of the message. Not only send an email and that's it, but try to make the pressure and maintain the pressure on this communication. And this is very, very important for all of us, because in some universities, as you know better than me, in some universities language are almost disappearing. For example, even in Portuguese universities or even in French universities, everything, well, in France there's a lot of language in university, and now you have English and English and English. Nothing against English, but I'm quite sure that people, like in my country, we need French, we need German, we need, for example, in Portuguese universities, German is a very, very rare language to be studied, because as we don't have enough students, we don't open groups on German. Well, this is a vicious circle. So we need to maintain this pressure to society and show that without language, this is not Europe. We are not citizens. We don't have this capacity of use language and to communicate. It's a question of communication, the best sense of communication.
Thank you. Other comments from the Circles panel?
It's rather a sort of did you know type of question, because it's things that I didn't mention yesterday in the general meeting. But again, I think as Liliana mentioned at some point earlier, we have created a communications manager for each national association. It is one of our first ways of getting in touch with everybody, apart from the new website, where we've tried to be as to put up as much information as possible. Yes, as you were saying, information is there. We need then to continue in the communicative process along the line. CercleS collaboration, we already have a memorandum of cooperation with the ECML. We've been involved, and a lot of CercleS members, I did mention yesterday, 198 people from CercleS were involved in a project that Brian North was carrying out on new descriptors for mediation. And I think we were the biggest group there working, and I think that's very important that CercleS was involved in that. We are, as in various European projects, as disseminators, as was mentioned earlier. We were part of the LinguaNet project and also the Lucide project. Okay, so that's very, I think I practically covered the things that we are doing now.
Thank you, Gillian. This morning, two friends from Padova presented a very interesting program that deals with exclusively autonomous language learning. So CercleS, that circle, have to keep on concentrating on autonomous language learning, as we know that many language centers do. For sure in Italy, but I'm sure in so many other countries in Europe and in the world. David, do you want to tell us something about it?
Well, I'm sure the answer to that is yes, but that isn't the only question that CercleS needs to be asking itself. What has struck me about this conference, and what I've come to know more closely about CercleS over the last 5 or 6 years because of my involvement with the journal, is how far on the Confederation is now compared with where it was in 2000 when I ceased to be president. During the 5 years that I was president, a great deal of effort was put in, especially by David Bickerton as Secretary General, in helping colleagues in different countries to develop their national associations so that CercleS would begin to acquire more full members than at that time we had. I think we probably had 8 or 9. And it's perfectly clear that is something that has come a long way in the intervening years. I think whether you're an officer of CercleS or an officer of one of the national associations, or simply someone who works in a language centre that's a member of a national association and affiliated to CercleS, it's important always to be aware of that, but to be aware that these things move forward, often at snail's pace, and sometimes slipping back in order to move forward again. It's difficult not to get impatient, but all of us really have to think of the work we're doing within this kind of framework as work not only for ourselves in the present, but also into the future. The question that we began with, this business of communication and so on, I was, just because of the randomness with which one necessarily participates in a conference like this and hears things, I was struck by 2 things. Yesterday morning, I heard several talks that were focused on issues of assessment related in one or another way to proficiency levels of the Common European Framework, assessment that was trying to introduce a degree of discipline, consistency, predictability to the often, to be brutally frank about it, rather corrupt world of university assessment. I'm sure a great deal more can be done in that area via focus groups. And I think it's through international communication and the development of international synergies that national associations gradually develop the kind of muscle they need in order to have an impact on their national scene beyond the confines of the world of the knowledge centre. The second thing that I attended was the inaugural focus group on autonomy yesterday, and there I was struck by the sort of common understanding of where this notion of autonomy begins, but the great diversity of contexts which causes different things to be emphasized. And I think that we, except that I'm in the past already, but you have a great deal to learn from one another through the efforts of focus groups like this, by coming together, by exchanging reports on what you do, by discussing, by trying things out that someone else has tried and made to work. And in all of this, I think the journal has so far a rather underexploited role to play. As for autonomy, because that's what I was asked about, I think autonomy is the secret to success in any kind of learning, but that's a big story.
Thank you, David. Maurizio?
Yes, I would like to add this sort of diachronic perspective. Let's say, perhaps many people do not realize, because luckily they are much younger than I am, what the reality was 25 years ago. We were quite isolated, because each one was working in his own or her own reality, having problems, trying to cope with them. When CercleS was founded, when iGLU was founded, I mean, we had opportunity of meeting, exchanging ideas, exchanging experiences, finding out that many problems were common, the solutions could be found, and it was a great improvement. If you look in the last 25 years with the Bologna process and so on, perhaps the field of foreign languages was one of the most critical in the sense of having to cope with innovation. It was not this problematic for mathematics or economics and so on. They had to just cope with the evolution of their own subject. We've been involved in, for example, just thinking of Italy, the fact that a second foreign language became compulsory, that we had to set certain objectives, certain goals, and we were lucky that we were actually meeting at least a couple of times a year to discuss these things, that we started assessing, deciding what sort of level, what sort of entry exam, what sort of test, certifications, and all this has changed in the last few years. And I think that we would have had great problems if we had continued to be isolated. I mean, we probably centers of excellence and people that were just forgotten and didn't know how to survive. Also because, as you can see, we are bound to change, at least in the Italian context, every 3 or 4 years. We have to, our mandate finishes and we have to hand over. So with this continuous change, because I mean, the language center director is not a job that continues for life, but it's just a task that university authorities decide and assign to you. There is continuous change. If there hadn't been this sort of continuity also at the institutional level, it would have been much, much more problematic. So, of course, people expect more and more, but something has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurizio. And my next and final question is for all of you, and the panel as well, of course. Creativity, critical thinking, learners in our mind. The 3 days gave so many interesting ideas. You gave us so many interesting ideas. Are we happy with that? Do we go back home with further challenge? Do we feel challenged? Will we create new contacts? Have we created during these 3 days contacts with new colleagues? Yes.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for an excellent conference and many very, very interesting papers and panels. I was wondering if we could be a little more creative and critical about conference formats. I don't know how you feel about it, but I have been in many conferences of 20-minute presentation, with maybe 5 minutes of discussion afterwards, and one after the other. What kind of other formats can we add on to the 3 days that we have? So might there be other things that we can add, maybe little corners for teachers? Can we have some really open event where we can tell people you can do whatever you like, you've got 20 minutes? And just see what comes out of it. In the same way in which the academic article has developed over the last 200 years, the conference format that we have now is something that's developed. And maybe we can start thinking of ways to add on to the format that we have already. Definitely one thing that I would like to encourage you to think about is multilingual presentations. We saw that this morning as well. It works. So we can maybe have more of that. That's one thing. The other thing is, how about expecting people to write up summary papers and submit those summary papers and have those summary papers read before the time, because that certainly develops the quality of the discussion, I think. So.
Stefan, thank you, thank you. Any comments? Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Is it working? Yes. Thank you for this conference. Marta Ginis from Nebrija University in Madrid. Related to this question that has been aroused, I want to ask Liliana if she considers the format of the poster less valuable than presentation, because that's the impression I got from her words. So could you please clarify that part? Thank you.
Thank you, Marta.
Thank you, Marta. No. I think you understood it differently. The idea behind conversations Edita had with some of colleagues from the conference was that it is a very small piece of paper to express and to show everything what was on her poster. So in terms of extra material, it would be better if she could have a presentation. Of course, a conference is limited, okay? Even if we introduce new formats and try to have some new forms of activity, we are still capped within 2-3 days, all right? So poster is a possibility for those of us who cannot have a presentation, or because of time limits, they submitted or just thought about this form of submitting information on research, on something they would like to, well, if not cooperate, share with us. So for sure, both. The quality, I don't feel I can even judge quality of given posters, because it's very individual. And what we had yesterday, it was a fantastic, and we shared with it Carmen, that all of us had a possibility, at least for some minutes, to look at the poster, read it, consult it with the author, and discuss deeply. So when I was talking about Edita's poster, it was fantastic for me. She could come here and have a possibility to well, show and share with you information about strategies, because that was the main topic. Of course, it is always like a poster, it has its limited form, it has its limited content, but I think it is also good for some of us, because there are a lot of people who prefer poster to presentations, okay? So again, you can see that we look at these from different angles. But coming to previous suggestion, I would say that, of course, for the next conference, we can think about, usually announcements are on the board, like very important, urgent changes of the program, but still there could be a forum of debate, small talk, or corners, different corners. I can assure you at my university we have plenty of space, so we can go to different corners and not only corners for discussion. But I think that you're absolutely right. One of, well, elements of good conference can be also video conferencing, because sometimes people, especially plenary speakers, are very occupied, very busy. So video conferencing is also another way of having somebody with us, although he or she is on another continent. Also, I think multilingual presentation is something what we always focused on, because our association concentrates not on English, although it's lingua franca, and we have to agree to that. But very often we have presentations where presentations are, for example, in English, but you have French slides, or vice versa, or any other languages. So this is very open and very, well, depends a lot on organizers, but I don't know whether it's time to evaluate this conference. I think that everybody could find slots for her and his interest, something what I think was very fantastically divided, and we had an opportunity to change rooms quite smoothly with Italian style, okay, a little bit late, which I like very much now. But yesterday, on our way back home, with Célio, we discussed, and Célio gave an example of Brazilian conference with 2,000 participants 14 sessions at one time. So I don't know whether we would like to go that way, because this, yes, and this is something we would avoid, okay? We had 4 sessions in one time, in one slot, so it was quite good for us to choose the best one because of our interests and also sometimes work, well, cooperation or potential projects and research. So coming back, Marta, I'm for posters, I'm not against posters. Once upon a time I had a poster myself in Argos, it was one of my first conferences, so it is also a fantastic opportunity for newcomers, maybe to start with a poster and then to finish with fantastic presentation. So everything is possible, and thank you.
Thank you, Liliana. Thank you, Marta. Just, I'll give the floor to David. Then, yes, I saw you, Sabina. Just a little bit, just a short remark about this issue. I'm talking on behalf of the program committee and the organizing committee. On our side, it was really like a way to, rather than a limited format, a variety, to have varieties within a conference. This is why the idea of presentation, post-presentation, focus groups, it's a different way of communicating. We were running a meeting yesterday, and at the same time I was looking at the people in the poster session venue. It was beautiful, beautiful, because people were talking and chatting and exchanging ideas and moving from one place to another. And the people who presented then, somebody told me that they were absolutely happy with this communicating way of communicating style. David, and then Sabina.
2 brief points. First of all, I think that in considering new formats, one's got to be very careful how one formulates a description of them in the call for papers, because participation for most people depends on the readiness of their institution to pay for them. And of course, one of the problems in some institutions is that you won't get paid if you're just doing a poster, whereas you will if you have a 20-minute paper accepted. So there has to be some kind of compromise. But I agree that it would be by no means too early to start looking at ways of having genuinely multilingual sessions, and it might be a way of transforming the handling of posters. You might have posters in a number of languages. You could have a poster session where everybody was expected to be involved in one way or another, and the posters were to stimulate, of course, discussion, but multilingual discussion.
Thank you, David.
J'aimerais bien supporter ce que mon collègue Stéphane a dit. Tout le monde est convaincu qu'on devrait être plus plurilingue, mais aussi à cette conférence, on avait beaucoup parlé seulement en anglais. Et moi, je regrettais de ne pas avoir eu plus de chance d'écouter l'italien, ou bien de parler français, ou d'écouter le français. Donc, c'est à nous de commencer, de changer la pratique. Il faut avoir le courage.
Petra and, okay. I'm learning names, so you see.
I would like to come back to Carmen's question, whether we take anything back home.
Okay.
And I must say, when I came here with my colleague Marianne, who is sitting somewhere, she asked me, well, what is next at our center? And I said, well, yes, I have to think about that because I'm getting bored of my own style. I need a new stimulus to change things. And today was actually, I thought was actually quite nice when we were this morning in the at the other end of the campus. we ended up being a small group in the room, and there were different presentations, and each time people from the audience said, but did you try that, or could you do that? And in fact, we were all thinking about our own teaching style or our own structures, and then develop the ideas further. And at some point the moderator said, we are now moving to the next presentation, and I stood there and said, shut up, could we please finish our discussion over here, because it's so interesting to develop the ideas any further. So I think the idea of the conference is to get ideas, to think beyond what we do, and if it's an occasion where which cannot be replaced by video conferencing or by a journal. They all have their need, but it's this moment where you sit in the room, you know to some extent what you'll get, but not really, and then in the presentation you find out and you get new ideas, and that helps us to develop things further. So I'm not that sure about the format, whether we should rethink it that much. One aspect that we changed over the years is this break between the presentations, and that is a very valuable moment where we actually start our discussions. We have tried in other contexts 1,000 different formats. We have the seminars, we have workshops, we have other meetings. So each of them have their role and their way. One final point is on the needs. In the discussion that went on earlier on, I think we should, one point that was missing to me is the needs of the learners. So when we talk about autonomous learning, is that a need the learners have, or what format do we have? Because what I realize in our context, for example, is we have blended learning, we have classroom classes, we have autonomous classes. The most popular ones are the contact classes, followed by blended learning, and the really autonomous ones are autonomous learning. They don't like them because they want to communicate, to be together, to interact. So like we want to be here and communicate. Language issue, I've tried that for at least 4 years or 8 years to have a multilingual conference here. And this time I decided I will not prepare my slides in 3 different languages because the need is there to some extent, but English has become the lingua franca, and that's why I make my point in English again, because that is the language that is understood by everybody. It doesn't mean that we should not put an effort into it and try to have the presentations also available in other languages. But let's look at the needs of our learners, the needs of our participants, and see what can be done next. Thanks.
Thank you, Joan, Petra, and
I would very much like to support Stefan's suggestion of trying out new formats at conferences. I thought the idea of having little corners where teachers could get together is a brilliant idea, because here in this space there were sofas where people could sit and gather together. Maybe it would be a nice idea to have a corner for people who are interested in teacher development, another corner for people who are interested in learner autonomy and so on, to guarantee a certain level of informality of exchange. Because the problem is we go to presentations that are stimulating and interesting, and most presentations that I was at, we didn't have enough time for discussion. So it would be great for me to know, because this is a very heterogeneous group of people, it would be great for me to have a corner to meet up with people who are mainly interested in admin problems or teacher development or things like that. The other suggestion I would like to make is that you could introduce this as an evening activity. I've been to conferences where they had PowerPoint karaoke sessions or Pichakucha sessions on certain topics. So usually they're meant to be for entertainment, but very often we had very stimulating discussions afterwards. I remember being at a conference where we had Pichakucha presentations about failure in our jobs or about motivation. And they were very funny and they were meant to entertain the audience, but a lot of what was presented was quite stimulating, and we had excellent follow-up discussions. So it might be nice as an idea for a follow-up conference, maybe one evening to dedicate to a Pichakucha night or so on a given topic that we're all interested in. Might be interesting.